You know, I really don't want to ruin the mystique and go rogue, so I feel like this is a bit of a gambit, but sometimes there are rules options that are just a bit of a colossus. They come out like a juggernaut and have the potential to wreak havoc on your campaign, and the next thing you know, they just turn one of your player characters into a beast. These options end up taking your campaigns by storm. Dark Archive has some player options that have the potential to come out like a dark phoenix. Today, let's talk about the new book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Dark Archive, on today's episode of The Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I'm the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I'm a storyteller who has totally not been replaced by his mirror doppelganger. No, really. You can trust everything I have to say. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today we're taking a look at the new book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Dark Archive, which takes a look at player and campaign options for Pathfinder 2nd Edition that are of a more mysterious sort than some of your normal campaign options. This book introduces new classes, new archetypes, a new versatile heritage, and an array of different feats and spells that all allow players and GMs to play around with very interesting and unique stories as compared to your typical Pathfinder 2nd Edition game. So today we're going to talk about what's in this book. I'm going to give my thoughts about this book and give you an overall grade that I think represents the quality of this book. Now, a couple of things I want to say really quick. First off, this is going to be a mini review of Dark Archive, mostly because the content in this book has the potential to be a super deep dive in a lot of different places, and if I tried to go into every nook and cranny of what Paizo has offered in Dark Archive, this video would be huge. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be offering other videos that will be taking a look at specific elements inside of the Dark Archives in the coming weeks and months. For example, I'm already featuring a lot of the new Dark Archive spells in my Spellslingers Academy short series, and next week, if everything goes according to plan, I'm hoping to have classic introductions for the new Psychic class, which you all voted on. And let's be honest, a lot of the other stuff in this book is really custom made for October Halloween content, so I would expect to see a lot of the content from this book showing up in some of my October videos here in a couple months. So there will be some deep dives on the content coming. This video is going to be a general overview, a quick introduction, and my basic thoughts about Pathfinder 2e's Dark Archive. So I would also like to give you my usual grain of salt, which is, you should always try before you buy. I'm just some guy on the internet, and my opinion is just that, an opinion. Checking out a product for yourself is always going to be the best review you can possibly get, so if you can check this out at a local gaming store or borrow it from a friend before making a purchase decision, that is always the best route. Oh, I almost forgot one more thing I need to say before I get going. Paizo did send me a free PDF copy of Dark Archive for the purposes of this review. They have not scripted this review in any way, but they did send me a copy so that I could read over it and use it as a point of reference in creating this video. So allow me to say, Paizo, thank you for the PDF, and thank you for the opportunity to review this product. A few more things before we get into the review real quick. Number one, please dive into the comments section and join the conversation around the Dark Archive. I want to hear your thoughts about this book, what you like, what you dislike, and where you agree or disagree with my thoughts on Dark Archive. And more importantly, if there are specific topics you would like me to deep dive, say when I'm doing some of those October videos, definitely let me know. I'd love to hear that. And this is also the part of the video where I say do all the YouTube stuff. Please like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel. Check out my free Discord and my Patreon. Both of those are linked in the video descriptions. Your support means so much to this channel. Alright, let's get started. Now, for those of you who may be new to reviews on this channel, the way I like to approach my reviews is I begin at the end, give you my overall thoughts on a product, and then work through what the product has to offer to show you how I kind of arrived at the conclusions that I have. So, with that in mind, let's begin with the question, what is my overall grade for Dark Archive? And I'm going to be honest here, I was really hesitant with the grade that I kept coming to, which is, I give the Dark Archive an A-. I'm serious, I am really happy that Paizo made this book, and while I have some nitpicks with this book, overall I think that this is a great storytelling-focused book that adds a ton of flavorful and interesting options to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, on this channel, the way I tend to approach grades is I try to make the utility of a product the primary factor in determining what grade I give something, which means that A ratings really should be reserved for books that are going to see very regular use at my gaming table. And Dark Archive is focused on mysterious, nuanced topics. It's focused on some niche aspects of storytelling. It's a lot of fun material, don't get me wrong, but it's the kind of material that feels like it should be a B rating or maybe even a high C rating in terms of the normal scale that I use. But I will say this, in the very short period of time that I have been looking over Dark Archive and examining its content, my players have been engaging with this content a lot more heavily than they have some of the other expansions for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Guns and Gears is really good, but only one of my players has really engaged with that book. The Advanced Player's Guide has a lot of great content, but again, I've only got one player that has really gone heavy with the content from the APG. For the most part, my players tend to stick to mostly core material, but Dark Archive has been different. My players have been very excited for the Psychic, for the Thaumaturgist, for several of the different options that are available inside the Dark Archive. My players have lit up and they are very interested in these new options that Pathfinder has given us, to the point that this book has seen more engagement from my table than some of the other books that would seem like they are more generally useful than Dark Archive would be. So on the basis of the excitement of my players, on the basis of the fun I've had engaging with this book, though this is something of a niche product, it is so well done and the options being offered are so exciting that I think it comes up to the lower A rating. I think that a lot of tables are going to find a lot of interesting stories that open up as a result of this product, and I think Pathfinder has brought an excellent product to the gaming table. Okay, but let's go a little bit deeper. What are some of the strengths of the book Dark Archive? And I think if you wanted to summarize the strength of this product in a simple word, it is storytelling. Now, if you're a fan of this channel, you know I am all about the storytelling side of TTRPGs. I prefer the title Storyteller to Game Master. I love the collaborative storytelling aspect of gameplay. So, storytelling is a big deal for me, and also might be part of the reason that my grade went so high on this product, just to be honest. But one of the really great things about this book is Paizo really approached this product with stories in mind. When we get into the layout of the book and the content of the book, I'll talk about it a little more in depth. But everything in this book is thematic, it's story-focused. The options that are available all lend themselves to unique and interesting tales, and that is something I absolutely love. Paizo doesn't just give us fun new crunch, they give us fun new stories with the crunch to back it up. I love that, and that really makes this a standout product for me. This book is going to have new classes and archetypes, new feats, new heritages, new spells, all kinds of new crunchy stuff that your players are going to love having access to, but all of it comes in the form of stories. And stories that both players and game masters, I think, are naturally going to want to sink their teeth into. As a good example of this, some of the chapters are referred to as stolen case files. And these stolen case files, each of those chapters comes with a mini adventure that corresponds to the rules elements introduced in that chapter. So, in the chapter that features secret societies, you get a mini adventure that revolves around the idea of secret societies. Later, when you talk about curses and pacts, again, you get a mini adventure that is themed around the idea of curses. And that is just a quick example of how good Paizo does with this book of tying all of the different elements that are introduced to interesting stories, and that is easily the best strength of this product. But okay, what about the flip side? What are the weaknesses of this product, or what are the nitpicks that I might have? And one of them maybe shouldn't surprise me with Paizo at this point, but I do have to complain about this. Dark Archive is hard to read. Like, seriously, my eyes hurt when I try to read the PDF that Paizo sent me. Now, I don't know if there was just something that messed up the quality of the PDF that got sent to me, but I'm going to say this, I really hope that when I get the print version of Dark Archive, I do plan to add this to my collection, I really hope that the print version is cleaner and easier on the eyes, because at least the version that got sent to me is a little bit hard to read. And I have seen some commentary from other people across the internet who have said similar things, that Dark Archive is a little bit hard to read, and this is not much of a surprise with Paizo. The organization can be confusing at times. Game Master content is frequently mixed in with player content, and while some content is obvious, on other occasions it's hard to tell, is this something that players should read or is this something that players shouldn't read? It can be a little bit of a mess. In fact, I kind of hate to say this because I feel like I'm going against the strengths of this book in saying it, but I kind of feel like Paizo tried too hard on the story side of the equation. They spend so much time weaving a narrative that it's sometimes hard to pull out the specific parts or points that you're interested in using, and it can be a little bit frustrating if you're trying to find something specific because it may not be clear exactly where you want to go. To give you an example, I love the mini adventures that Paizo included. I think that those were fantastic inclusions, and I'm glad that Paizo gives us those mini adventures, but the book is structured in such a way that those mini adventures are intended to build off each other every couple of levels. And that feels a little excessive to me. Why do I need a mini adventure for Deviant Abilities that also connects to Temporal Anomalies? I'm glad I have both of these mini adventures, but in reality I'm probably not going to use both of them in the same campaign, and Paizo taking the time to weave the threads through feels a little overdone. Again, I feel kind of bad complaining about that, but the presentation of the book sometimes does feel like the narrative almost overwhelms the actual utility in play. Don't get me wrong, I still love the narrative, I still love all the work Paizo did here, but they could have pulled it back a little bit and I think it would have made the book a little more useful. But let's move on to the contents of the book itself to get an idea of what Paizo has included in Dark Archive so that you have an idea of what it might offer your gaming table. Dark Archive is presented as the work of a mysterious individual known as KHW who has stolen some material from the Dark Archive of the Pathfinder Society. The Society has decided to shut down the Dark Archives, and whoever KHW might be, they took it upon themselves to rescue some content that was stored in the Pathfinder archives. The book Dark Archive itself is essentially split into two major sections. The first section is called the Archivist Training Manual, and the second section is called the Stolen Case Files. Now the first section, the Archivist Training Manual, is probably the section that's going to see the most use at gaming tables, because this is the section that introduces two new classes to Pathfinder 2e, the Psychic and the Thaumaturgist. The Psychic is a new occult spellcasting class that draws its magical abilities from, well, something internal. Clerics draw their powers from the gods, druids draw their powers from nature, but psychics, they find their powers somewhere inside, from their emotions, from their thoughts, from mantras that they repeat, from the different ways that they might organize what's going on inside their own head. The Psychic is a full spellcasting class, though it is a full spellcasting class that focuses more on cantrips than other spellcasting classes might. The Thaumaturgist is not a spellcasting class, but is rather a class that is all about researching, identifying, and finding ways to overcome strange or unusual creatures in the world around them. The Thaumaturgist is essentially a 2e update of what used to be known as the Occultist class, but in 2nd edition, instead of relying on a blend of spells and implements, in Pathfinder 2e, the Thaumaturgist is all about their implements, different items that they have bonded to, such as a lantern, a bell, a chalice, a wand, or regalia that they might wear, all of which impart special abilities that the Thaumaturgist can turn against the creatures that they face. Essentially, the Psychic and the Thaumaturgist, taken together, offer a spellcasting and martial approach to dealing with different mysteries in the world around you. Now, I will be taking a full look at the Psychic and Thaumaturgist through my Classic Introduction series, and if everything goes according to plan, Classic Introduction Psychic should be up next week, and I'm hoping to do Classic Introductions for the Thaumaturgist sometime in October as part of my Halloween series. So I will be doing a deeper dive on these classes and what they have to offer at a later date, but I will say I like the spread that Paizo has gone for here. A spellcasting approach and a martial approach to dealing with weird stuff in the world of Golarion. I think it's balanced, I think it's intelligent, and overall I do think both classes carve out an interesting niche for themselves in terms of gameplay. The Psychic is a full spellcasting class, but it's a full spellcasting class that really pushes what you can do with cantrips. And personally, I think the Psychic is going to play very similar to classes like the Warlock in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But like I said, we'll be talking about that in more depth in a later video. The Thaumaturgist strikes me as being similar to the Investigator, though fans of this channel, you probably won't be surprised to hear me say, the Thaumaturgist really feels like an upgraded Investigator to me. Most of what the Investigator does, I feel like the Thaumaturgist does better with more flavor and in a much more entertaining fashion, so no surprise, I'm a pretty big fan of what the Thaumaturgist is and what it does, and I really love the very different and very flavorful implements that the Thaumaturgist gets to use. A Thaumaturgist who is using a mirror can overcome their enemies in a very different way from a Thaumaturgist who is using a bell or a chalice. And to be honest, I haven't really seen any Pathfinder 2e classes that really dive into using equipment in such interesting ways, so I think it's a pretty good niche. Overall, I am very happy with both of these classes, and for these two classes alone, I think Dark Archive brings a lot of value to gaming tables. The next major section of Dark Archive is the Stolen Case Files, and these are essentially 8 different case files that are supposedly things that the Pathfinders were trying to research inside the world of Golarion. So it's sort of 8 different standalone topics that each represent unique types of stories that you could add to your campaigns. The first chapter is on Cryptids and represents unique or interesting monsters outside of the scope of the usual enemies that characters might encounter in a Pathfinder 2e game. Now for all of these chapters, there is a lot of different material. There's story material, there's mini adventures, there is a lot of stuff crammed into these chapters. I'm just going to be highlighting a couple of things that I think are particularly interesting for players and or game masters. The Cryptids chapter is one of the few chapters that I feel lends itself a little more to game masters over players, and this is a chapter that I feel like GMs are probably going to get some mileage from, primarily because it gives you rules for altering monsters to turn them into cryptids. You have rules for experimental or mutant monsters and how to create them, and one of my favorite monsters in TTRPGs is the Bullet, and they've got this really cool experimental Bullet on one of the pages that's got like armor and wires and all kinds of stuff. I love the artwork, and I'm definitely throwing that monster at my players at some point. But Game Masters are just going to love the fact that they now have options for adjusting monsters and making new and interesting encounters from these cryptid options that the chapter presents. As for players, one of the things that they will find interesting is what's known as aftermath feats. Aftermath feats are a type of feat that a player can take to represent the impact of an encounter with a particular monster that the player has had. For example, there's a feat called Echo of the Fallen that a player can take after they successfully lay a ghost or a haunt to rest. Essentially, if your players have a significant story encounter with particularly rare monsters, you can give your players options for unique abilities to reflect what they've been through, and that is a fantastic example of how you support story with mechanics and do it well. Now, I'll be honest, the next chapter in Dark Archive is probably my least favorite chapter, and that is the Secret Societies chapter. I honestly feel like they could have taken the Secret Societies chapter and kind of crammed it together with the Cults chapter, and I wouldn't have noticed a difference. But the Secret Societies chapter is what you think it's going to be. It's going to have some narrative information on different secret societies in the Golarion setting. It's going to talk about how to become a member of a secret society. In terms of crunch, it does give new occult skill feats, new gear, new services that secret societies can perform. There is information to support secret societies in play, though to be honest, of all of the chapters in the Stolen Case Files, this one is the one that falls a little flat for me. Honestly, I would have liked to see more here. But from one of the weakest chapters in Dark Archive, we move on to what is probably my favorite chapter on spontaneous ignitions of supernatural might, or so-called Deviant Abilities. When you are reading this chapter, if you are not conspicuously humming the theme to the X-Men cartoon the entire time, you are not a living creature who has joy in your life. I'm sorry, that's just how it works. Deviant Abilities is so much fun. Paizo has given us the ability to play X-Men. The Deviant Abilities chapter is going to give you information on how to play characters with Deviant Abilities. This mostly comes in the form of feats that a character can take and then later upgrade, as well as a few Deviant Ability type spells that a player can use to portray characters who have abnormal abilities. Now, a lot of these abilities are themed around monsters inside of the Pathfinder setting, so the supernatural healing ability is themed around trolls. But, you know, if you wanted to mirror the ability of maybe Wolverines instead. Oh, I'm trying to get a content strike, aren't I? Listen, I could go on and on about Deviant Abilities for a while. All I'm going to say is, every game master out there, if you are interested in running an X-Men School for the Gifted style campaign, Deviant Abilities plus the free archetype rules in the Game Master Guide, do it. You will not regret it. I love this chapter. The next chapter is honestly probably the creepiest in my opinion, because it's on the subject of mirrors and imposters. And I think you can see how this chapter could get really creepy and lead to some very frightening games very quickly. There is some interesting content in here. You get the alter ego archetype, which is a lot of fun, but my personal favorite, and probably my favorite single mechanical inclusion of the book, is the new Reflection Versatile Heritage, essentially allowing you to play the evil twin. Someone looked in a mirror, and then you stepped out. I love this, it's amazing. Paizo, thank you for adding this to Pathfinder 2e. I love it. The next chapter is on the subject of cults, and this is another chapter that I feel is a little bit weaker. You do get the interesting living vessel archetype that allows your character to be possessed by something as a mechanical impact in the game. That's pretty cool. Personally, my favorite thing about the cults chapter is the new apocryphal domain spells, representing the idea that maybe your cleric has learned a magical tradition that is no longer supported by the mainline branch of their church. I think that's a very interesting story twist. You also get information on different cults inside of the Pathfinder setting. This is an interesting chapter, but kind of like Secret Societies, is a little bit weak to me overall. The next chapter after that is Curses and Pacts, which is a little bit of a grab bag, but I like some of the toys you can get out of this grab bag, and I think this is another chapter that Game Masters especially are going to have some fun with. This chapter is going to talk about new cursed items, and it's going to give you a new witch patron called the Pact patron. You also get the Pathfinder and Cursed Maelstrom archetypes, which is a lot of fun, but one of my favorite things for storytellers, which will probably not surprise anyone, is the new Tempting Bargains. Curses that are not all that bad. Storytellers, have fun. The next and next to last case file is probably the most hyped case file, and if you've been paying attention to the news about Dark Archive, this is probably one of the things you've heard a lot about. It is the Temporal Anomalies chapter, which deals with weird time stories. And while it's not my favorite chapter, it's an easy top 3 for me, and I definitely think there's a ton of fun and interesting content inside of this chapter. One of the major sections is new temporal spells, which give you access to spells like Time Pocket and Time Sense, or the far more terrifying Suspended Retribution. And you also get a couple of new archetypes, the Time Mage and the Chrono Skimmer, which offers a way for magical classes and non-magical classes to get in on the temporal anomaly action. Finally, you get a new and powerful Oracle mystery, the Time Mystery, that Oracle players can make use of. All in all, I think this is a very fun chapter, and I think the hype for this chapter is warranted. There are a couple of chapters that I enjoy more, see Deviant Abilities earlier, but this is definitely some entertaining content. The last of the stolen case files I need to be transparent on. I come with a little bit of a bias against, and that is the case file on Mindscapes. Now, Occult Adventures in Pathfinder 1st Edition had rules for Mindscapes and Psychic duels and content like that, and if I'm being entirely transparent, I did not like the 1st Edition rules for Mindscapes. They were frustrating, I didn't like trying to use them, and ultimately it was just a type of content that I said, I'm not going to use this in my games. So when I saw Mindscapes was one of the options for Dark Archive, honestly that kind of put me on a defensive just because of my reaction in 1st Edition. The rules look better, but to be honest, I haven't tried them yet, and there is a portion of me that is reluctant to try them. I'm going to force myself at some point to try out the new Mindscape rules, but for now this is an area of Dark Archive content that I will admit I haven't really had the gumption to try out. But it does come with rules for Mindscapes, it does come with rules for Psychic Duels, it comes with 3 new archetypes, the Psychic Duelist, the Mindsmith, and the Sleepwalker. All 3 of them are flavorful, and I will admit on first glance it does look like the rules are handled better than the 1st Edition version. I promise I'll give it a try at some point, but I haven't worked up the nerve to do that yet, just being honest. After the case files you get things like spell lists and item lists, but for the most part, the Archivist training manual and the stolen case files represent the core of why you would be picking up this book, and overall, I think it's pretty safe to say that the quality of this book is pretty high. There is a ton of fun content. I am super excited about the new Psychic and the new Thaumaturge class, and my desire to run a Mutant Academy style one-shot for my players. It's going to happen at some point. Deviant Abilities is just amazing. there is a ton of great content in here, and I think that players and game masters are both going to find a lot of material that they can sink their teeth into and really get some good stories out of. That is the big takeaway for me on this product. Paizo has done a fantastic job of matching good mechanics with good stories in a way that I think is going to be very exciting for people in the Pathfinder 2e community. But those are my thoughts. The time has come for me to turn the conversation over to you. Have you had a chance to look at the Dark Archive? And if so, what are your thoughts about it? What kind of content are you excited to see? And is there content that you feel is weaker or something that you would have liked to see Paizo address instead? Please jump down to the comments section and let me know your thoughts. And be sure to let me know what content from the Dark Archive you would like to see me take a deep dive into in the future. I plan to revisit a lot of this stuff around Halloween, so if there's something you want to see, definitely let me know. As always, don't forget the YouTube stuff. If you enjoyed the video, like it and share it, subscribe to the channel. You can check out my free Discord, or you can support the channel financially through my Patreon. Both of those are linked in the video description. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.